Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the February 14th Radnor Township School District Facilities Committee meeting. First item on our agenda are introductions and administrative remarks. Are there any administrative remarks?
Yes, I'll actually give one regarding the trail. Our solicitor has been in contact with the township representatives, and they have been going back and forth a little bit, and there are still some questions to be answered. So our solicitor recommended if we would have an issue with the township representative coming to our March 14th meeting, that we can maybe get some of these things worked out immediately instead of bouncing back and forth. Michelle and I believe that is the best way to go, so we would just like your opinion if it's okay if we bring that township representative to talk about the trail for March 14th.
I think that's a great idea. Is there work that needs to be done before we can have a productive meeting? Because we had put forth some questions, I think.
I will contact our solicitor.
We haven't heard answers to yet.
And tell him that we are good for that if there's anything needs to be done prior, he should contact us.
Well, we are intending to kind of negotiate those questions at this meeting?
I'm not sure if it's negotiations or if Mr. Christofko just wants the township to give us specific answers of yeses or nos or those type of things. But I will contact him and email the committee with what he's looking for.
So I love this idea of, finalizing what we're going to do, but I think within, if someone could contact Mr. Christofko, did I say that correctly?
Yes.
And just get answers, within the next week to at least our questions, so we know if we're in agreement on everything, then this will be a very nice meeting. If we don't have answers to the questions we put forth, then I don't know.
Yeah, I will contact him tomorrow, and then
Yeah.
when he responds, I will copy.
Yeah,
The
because I
committee.
think that needs to be done before we have a meeting with them.
Okay, well, we will tentatively put it on for the March 14th. And
Definitely put it
if
on.
the committee feels comfortable after questions have gone back and forth, then we'll continue. If not, we'll pull it and put it at a later date if needed.
Well, so I'm agreeing with you. I want it on the March meeting, but I just think it would be really useful to do a little groundwork, because we've had these questions out there now
For a
for at
period of
least
time.
2 months, and I don't know.
Correct.
Yeah, so let's just
Yep, we'll
see
take care
where
of
it sits.
Todd, would I also be able to see a copy of the grant proposal? Yes, I'd like to see that.
Sure. I will
since
have
we are
Mr.
associated with
Gustafko email it to me, and then I'll send it out to the committee,
Okay.
Mr.
Right.
Batchelor and Ms. Tico.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
And I also have some administrative remarks. I have some answers regarding questions that were asked about parking at the high school at a previous meeting. At a previous meeting, we were asked how many parking spaces are available to be assigned to students at the high school. There are, according to Mr. Bechtold, 177 student spots. We were also asked how many of those spots are sold in the student lottery. I am assuming that means the students that they put in when the seniors put in their name. So there are 177 spots. 3 of those in the past have been given to the nonprofit organizations of Reading Education Foundation, ABC House, and the Scholarship Fund, leaving 174 spots available to be given away in the lottery. Seniors interested in a spot put their name and information on an index card and give that to the office. Names are randomly drawn to see who gets one of the remaining spots, and then they have to submit their license, insurance, pay the $75 fee, and pick up their parking pass. I do want to say that this is what's currently going on in 16-17. We were asked if students were given preferential spots, and Mr. Bechtold said yes, there are the 3 spots that are given to REF, ABC House, and the Radnor Scholarship Fund. And those spots are in the senior lot. All of the others are randomly selected. In addition to this, if a student were handicapped and requested a handicap spot, they would be given preferential treatment. If a student does request a handicap spot, they would not be required to pay the $75 fee. And how many spots, again, were given away to nonprofits? The 3 that we had spoken about earlier. And Mr. Bechtold noted that that's a practice that's been been ongoing for a number of years. It was in practice before he came, and he continued that practice after he became principal. And then we were also asked how the $75 fee collected from individual students are targeted for the main parking lot. So what we do with those monies is we have an account in the general fund, a revenue account. It's called parking permits and fines. We also issue our own parking tickets on school district property if people are parked illegally. Both the student parking permit money as well as the parking tickets that are issued by our Director of Security are deposited into that account. Roughly over 12,000 or just under 13,000 is deposited in that account every year. And then on the expense side, we maintain the parking lots. We do line striping, we buy the signage, we do the parking place cards. All of those things are paid for out of the operations budget, as well as lighting, maintenance, all kinds of things like that, snow plowing. So we know for a fact that even though we don't have an independent expenditure count where we charge everything related to parking at the high school and throughout the district, that the $13,000 we collect does not cover the costs annually.
I think I misheard you. You said that there's 3 spots for ref, for the ABC House, and for the Scholarship Fund. And did you also say there's 3 preferential spots?
Those are the 3 preferred spots.
So they no longer give spots to the crew team, and they were, I think, a number of them reserved for certain sports teams.
Not from the information that I received from
They
Mr.
no
Beckman.
longer do that.
So,
Okay.
I don't know if Anthony is still here, but
Okay.
he might have the answer to that. But
Okay. And I think it's important to say that this is what we did at the beginning of this year that we are no longer going to be doing. So, right?
Correct. So currently, we have suspended the process of giving those parking spaces to those 3 nonprofit organizations.
Is that it for administrative remarks? Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment at this time?
Good evening, Cindy Spurtle, 106 Valley Forge Terrace, Wayne. I have a correction to the minutes from Ms. Sherry, who was not able to join us this evening. She's away. It's a small correction, and it is on page 2, item number 3. And it was referring to the Radnor Elementary School. It's referred to as third-party agreement, and it's actually a tri-party agreement that was signed between the Township School District and the Radnor Corporate Center. So if that small change could be made before you approve the minutes. And then also, thank you to Michelle for the answering the questions on the parking spaces. One other question that Ms. Sherry had is, what is the value of the spaces that go to the nonprofits? And do these need board approval? The 3 spaces that go specifically to the nonprofits. And then proceeding with additional, and this may be covered in the question on the current programs. The budget was drafted on current programs, and has that been further analyzed for the needs and necessities of having each one of those programs? Has it gone through further analysis? And I went through the capital improvement schedule and had a few questions on, I understood based on the explanation that was given at last committee meeting on cash on hand and how things fall into that. There are several large items that appear in the cash on hand column but didn't appear in previous years. Does that mean they appeared in years prior? or how is the cash generated? And this is, one example is Ithan Elementary School. There's $100,000 in cash on hand for the remodeling the exterior. The cash on hand in the line below that, I understand, it's just what was budgeted and what's spent year to date. That's easy to see the cash on hand and explain that one. And then there's one that doesn't appear as cash on hand in the Radnor Middle School, and that's the flooring and the carpets, that some money has been spent. Is that because the money will be spent before the year end? But the big expense for the new 2017-18 budget, which, as mentioned and as we understand, is not included in the preliminary budget numbers that are being worked on. And that's the $1 million for the replacement of the home side stadium bleachers, including ADA compliant seating. Now, the cost, we've gone from an estimate for the bleachers in 2015 of $400,000 to another estimate in January of 2016 to $520,000, and then the estimate in January of this year of $600,000. And this revised schedule that was included in tonight's agenda was revised the day after the last meeting on January 10th. This is January 11th, and we've gone to $1 million. Now, this is $1 million that's classified as a safety item, which means it should be done, yet it's not included, so this is 67% increase over the prior amount. And so a further explanation I would appreciate. Thank you.
Hello, Roberta. Welcome.
Welcome and good afternoon. I was just interested to listen to the discussion regarding the Radnor Township Trail, and I was wondering if there was, I know in the past there have been board members who have been on the Park and Rec Committee. Are you still on that, Chuck? So you're familiar with that, and I think, is there another board member on? So I would think she might want to be a part of that meeting as well. So I would think it would be prudent to invite her to be a part of that, given her role in the trail development. And also to make sure that if there are negotiations, they usually aren't held in public sessions, and I think that's what Ms. Solomon's concerned about. Also, I wanted to make a comment regarding the potential of perhaps involving if we have a safety issue with the bleachers, that perhaps the athletic sponsors might be able to contribute something or do some fundraising to help in that regard, because I know they do generate a considerable amount of income to help support our student sports programs. And finally, I believe I emailed people after the last meeting. I believe there was some discussion by Mr. Hearn about the potential of having actually a propane fueling station at the high school, and questioning whether or not that is a safety consideration that you may want to look at in terms of any kinds of incidents and its implications to the high school and surrounding facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. All right, seeing no other public comment, that brings us to the approval of the minutes. And I did take note of what Ms. Spurtle said, and I think that this is a synopsis of Judy's comments, and if she said tri-party. Are you guys okay with amending the minutes, or would you like to wait and review it?
If she wants to amend her own comments, that's fine.
That's where it falls. So, other than changing third party to tri-party, the minutes
Looks good.
look good. Okay, so other than that, the minutes stand as written. Let's move on to the first item on our agenda, which is the Ithan Playground update.
So I'm sure all of you recall that we needed to do some site work out at the Ithan Elementary School on the playground before we could install the new playground equipment. So we've been working since October to try and get the plans done, and get all the bid specifications together to do those repairs. The project took several turns. Initially, we thought that we could do it ourselves, and then we found that the project was much bigger than anticipated, and so it kept expanding. The last time we talked about the fact that there was roughly $150,000 left from the construction of the Ithan additions, and $200,000 left on the additions at Wayne that could be used for future projects, and I wanted to save those dollars, one for the playground and the other to remove the modulars. So the good news is the modulars are removed from Wayne, so that $200,000 that was set up, and we'll look at that in the capital fund, to be reserved for that is now available, and we were able to open the bids for the construction on the playground on February 7th. We had bids from 4 bidders. They bid from a low of $59,000 to a high of $117,850. So roughly between the money that was reserved for Ithan and the removal of the modulars at Wayne that had been reserved, that will free up $290,000 that we can use in our capital, as cash on hand in our capital plan when we review that. We're currently trying to verify all references, check all references, but we believe that this will be ready to be placed on the agenda for board approval at the meeting on the 28th.
Did we ever get an answer to, I think it was public questions and questions we had about whether or not this is a foreseeable event from this extra runoff, water runoff was from, like, the architect's not really realizing that this is going to dump water there, or was this a pre-existing water condition we just never knew about because we never put a playground there before?
We do not believe that it was a result of the construction. I know that there's an access road that's near that area. The detention basins that are being replaced were in poor condition. We think that those detention basins actually failed and caused the water to remain on the playground area. They're not working properly. They will be replaced as part of the site work.
And we did put a berm out on the main road onto our property to make sure any water coming off the road would not go in there, that it kept going down.
Thanks.
Okay, so you've got the bids, so what's the timeline now on?
The timeline is they will start immediately the day after. The contractors all know that they needed to have clearance forms for anyone who would be doing site work, so they've already got those things in progress. So we anticipate that they will start the 29th. We anticipate that final completion contingent upon weather. Oh, I'm sorry, March 1st.
March 1st, yes.
And contingent upon weather, that it will be completed or in early April.
Okay.
And they are not installing the playground equipment. The playground equipment will be installed by the manufacturer. So it's a coordination of projects, and all of that should be completed by mid-March.
Yeah, it would be my preference with spring coming to get this up and running for our students.
Unfortunately, they're
if we
not
can.
going to be able to use the playground because it needs to be seeded.
Oh,
So that,
another year?
yes, fall.
Oh, we can go on in fall?
Yeah.
Oh, good. All right.
Would it be cost prohibitive to sod it?
I would think sod would be fairly expensive.
It's a pretty large area.
That's true.
Oh, wow. Don't even. Give grass a chance. All right, so I think that's great. Let's make sure it gets on the agenda.
And
You
just
guys
so
good?
everyone knows, we do have the playground equipment in storage.
Okay.
The band has allowed us to use their large trailer, so that's been in storage this whole time. So we didn't have to pay to have a separate tractor trailer come in and store it. So when we're ready for it, we'll be able to haul that trailer out to Ithan to install.
Okay.
Todd, could you refresh our memories about, because there's a lot of people in the public, when they see something categorized as safety. Safety, we categorize something as a safety issue, doesn't mean it's falling over. It doesn't mean that it's condemned. It means that there are safety issues that we need to address.
Correct.
And-
It's something coming up that we need to address at some point in order that it doesn't get to the stage where it is, not being able to get on the bleachers. We actually have a bleacher inspector coming out, I don't know if it's today or next Tuesday, to inspect, just to make sure that we can put people on there for this spring and this fall if needed, and that way we know we're covered for that. So we have contracted with somebody to inspect. And we're also, while they're coming out, we're inspecting the interior bleachers in the gymnasiums, just to make sure those are okay, because they haven't been inspected for 3 or 4 years, and that way we're covered there as well. Thank you. Sure.
Does that bring us to item 2, I think?
The second item on our agenda is the Ithan and Wayne construction projects. Those projects are mostly completed. There's a small number of punch list items. We met last Friday to go over all of the punch list items. We believe that we have all of them scheduled, and we will be able to do final payment. We are going to negotiate some deductions for some site work that the contractor feels our staff can complete, such as reseeding of the grass at Wayne. That's not a very large area, but our staff can definitely do the reseeding, and we'll do that probably after the kids leave for the summer. At Ithan, it's also reseeding and moving some trees. The trees are warranty items, so that will not be a deduct, but since we're doing site work in the area, the playground area, which is where the reseeding needs to occur, it's going to be taken care of by our new contractor that's going to complete that. So we will do a deduction for that as well. So hopefully we'll be able to wrap that up. I believe that the blacktop at Wayne will be repaired by the end of February, and once that's repaired and it's satisfactory, then we can get the payment processed.
So of the items left on the punch list, can you give us some dollar amount? You may not know this off the top of your head. What are we talking here that still remains to be done, like dollar amounts?
About $14,000.
Okay.
It's not substantial.
Okay. Committee, any comments? Okay. Okay. I think we're ready to talk about the capital plan. So agenda item number 3 is the review again of the capital plan, which was presented to us at our last meeting for discussion.
So we'll start talking about the capital plan. The capital plan has been reviewed again. It's been gone over, and we have changed the priority codes in each of the various areas to reflect more accurately if something is truly a safety issue. And as Todd explained earlier, that does not necessarily mean that something is falling apart or could cause bodily injury to an individual who uses it. It just means that most times that the item is getting close to the end of its useful life. The first page that you see here up on the screen, this is a cost of the 5-year summary. So what this does is it takes the sheets that are behind this page, breaks it down by the various building, administration, transportation, elementary schools, middle school, and high school, and it shows the projects that were budgeted and the year-to-date expenditures that have been spent for 16-17, and then it shows 4 years out, anticipated projects in 17-18, 18-19, 19-20, and 20-21. The first sheet that we're going to look at is the administration building. On this page, nothing really has changed from what was previously presented. We talked last month about the fact that we are going to do the HVAC system over spring break in this building here. So even though the project was anticipated to be done in 17-18, we're going to actually do it in 16-17. So that is one item that we know that we're going to need to pay for. That project was actually pushed and transferred in a previous fiscal year. That's why it has cash on hand. It was budgeted in 14-15. It was pushed to 15-16. It was pushed to 16-17 and then to 17-18. So that $50,000 has been sitting out in the fund to pay for that repair for a number of years. In regards to the flooring and the carpet, there was $10,000 that had previously been budgeted for flooring and carpet. It would have been before the 16-17 budget year. That's why you're seeing cash on hand of $10,000, but you're not seeing anything in the budgeted column. we're recommending that that cash on hand be utilized. We don't feel that there's any flooring that needs to be replaced in this building that is an emergency situation. And the elevator controls, again, was previously budgeted, but we're going to push that to 1920. So we're suggesting that the cash on hand, the $70,000 for the elevator controls, be freed up to pay for another project at the administration building or elsewhere. So at the administration building, there's nothing that absolutely must be completed in 17-18. Again, the HVAC is it's showing in 17-18, but it's actually going to end up being completed in 16-17. When we move on to the transportation department, they currently are using a portable generator.
Correct.
And we're recommending in 17-18 that we put in a new generator. We're not certain if the portable generator is enough power for them, and in the event that we would have an extended power outage, we believe that they need to have a more stable generator out at the transportation department.
We would be looking at that when we go to bid it out for cost. Worst case, we would have to trench backwards from the propane tank to the transportation building in order to do it, but be more fuel efficient. Absolutely.
Todd, how much power do we get? We have our generators that are on at the high school?
Well, we have generators at the high school, but we have just a little portable one at the transportation center just to keep the lights going. But if we would get into a cold snap that, let's say, electricity's out for a couple days in the middle of winter, and we would want to start the buses the next day, we wouldn't have enough power through a portable in order to heat those buses, the diesels, in order to get them going.
Did we look at running a line from our high school to the?
I don't know if we've looked at that. We will look at that,
I will
but
look
with
at that to
that
see.
gully between the two buildings and the distance we'd have to trench and the size wire you would need, I don't know if it would be cost effective to run it off of that. But something we will look
yeah,
at. I'll
be
talk
worth
to maintenance
looking
when
at,
we get to the point, starting July 1, that we're going to move forward. If we move forward with this, that when we start pricing, those will be things that we'll be looking at.
I'm just curious of
Sure.
if we have.
Why couldn't you run it in the air?
You potentially could.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Typically, with generator lines, you trench.
I know it's usually underground.
But,
yeah.
I mean, with where we are, we may be able to make it over there because there's not a lot
Yeah,
of traffic
it's just
going.
woods.
We'd really only have the one road
Yeah.
and the parking lot to go over.
It's just a thought, because if we have an extended cold snap, I'm assuming the kids aren't going to be there. So,
Correct.
you know, that generator's sitting unused, and you can run a line to the buses.
Right.
So the last item on this page is bus replacement. You can see that in 16-17, there were $251,385 budgeted for school bus replacement. That is for propane buses. To date, we haven't spent anything, and what I'm recommending is that we not make a purchase of school buses before the end of the 16-17 school year. And we make that $251,000 of cash available, and then we go out to bid in the summer of 17-18 for school buses. We currently replace 4 to 5 buses a year, depending on cost. We have a replacement schedule that we utilize. And we actually got behind on our replacement schedule, which we typically do in the summertime, because we were looking at the propane pilot. So that's when our fleet replacement moved from July and August to January, February, and I'm recommending that we get back on cycle by postponing that purchase. The purchase we anticipated in 16-17. At Ithan Elementary, there is some roof replacement. That is labeled as priority 2, which is building integrity. Whenever we do look at replacing a portion of the roofs, and Ithan is an old building that does have some roof issues from time to time, we take a look at what section we need to replace, and we rely on our contractor to help us determine the most appropriate sections to replace. That number, that $270,000 number, It may actually be a little bit higher than what we need. We were able to do some roof replacements when we were working on the renovations at Ithan, and we were able to do that ahead of time. So that number may decrease as we move forward through the budget process.
And the main roof was broken up into 3 sections, and this would be the third and final section of the major. You can see on the out years, we have some other roofing money there. That's for the other roofs that aren't the major building.
We're also recommending partial repointing. There's some areas of the brick that is starting to deteriorate, and we'd like to get that replaced because we know that eventually we will get water penetration if we don't address that. There are restroom hardware doors that we need to replace, recommending $8,000 for that. Currently, we are not able, students, when they are utilizing the restrooms, are not able to lock the doors, so we want to be able to put a privacy lock on. We've come up with a temporary solution, but that's something that we would like to address as well in 17-18. No, it's the hardware. The hardware runs roughly $500 per door. It is very expensive hardware. We are looking at alternative options.
Yeah, I had the same reaction when you did. So I asked maintenance just to go to Lowe's and get a commercial grade door handle. We put one of those in and we're kind of testing that out. My philosophy is if we have to replace those every 5 years instead of every 20 years, and it's cheaper over the life of the 20 years, we're still better off to do that. So it's in there. We're not guaranteeing we're going to go with the true commercial grade, but we're testing something out just to see if we can save money and it still works.
Go ahead, Roberto. Did you?
Ithan has a bathroom outside every classroom.
Yes.
Right.
Or many of them.
Okay.
There's a lot of restrooms at Ithan.
Wow. I went to Wayne where we had to share one for every 4, so, you know.
So you can see as we move down this schedule that remodeling the exterior at Ithan has $100,000. I talked about that earlier. There had been $150,000 in there. The reason why you don't see anything in 16, 17 or for year to date and what's been budgeted is because we haven't paid anything out on those projects. We've been trying to finalize the punch list, and we will be paying some things out. And those projects were budgeted in the 15-16 school year. So that's actually a carryover from 15-16. So that $100,000, we know that we're not going to need to utilize that to do all of the renovations, the site work for the playground area. So that now has become available for us to help offset some of the costs of the things that we're proposing. In regards to the furniture, you can see that there was $15,000 that was budgeted for interior furniture. We only spent $67.54, so $8,246 is available to help offset some of the costs of the other projects. And the last project that we are proposing is data wiring. That is identified as an instructional need. Our data wiring has not been replaced for 20-plus years, I believe, so it is old. We are currently in the process of replacing the data wiring in this building, so the technology department had put together a replacement plan where not every single building was replaced at the same time because of the large cost.
Would it actually be cheaper? How many components do it all?
Actually, we run the wires, our maintenance guys, yeah.
Wayne Elementary School just has a small, limited number of projects. They only have one. The exterior doors on the gym are in poor shape, and we would like to replace those. Roughly a cost of $12,000. You can see all the cash on hand. The $2,500 for a window, we were able to actually do that repair ourselves, so we did not utilize that. We don't anticipate spending any of those dollars. Playgrounds, we had $30,000 left from a prior fiscal year, money that was not spent. The same with the exterior project budgeted in 15-16. We estimate that there'll be $200,000 left from that as well. And then furniture for the interior, that's the new additions. You can see that $35,000 was budgeted, just under $25,000 was spent, freeing up $10,000. Radnor Elementary, the only project that we're recommending at that building at the current time is the resurfacing of the playground. There is a lip. I'll let Todd talk a little bit about that playground and what repairs need to be done there.
Behind Radnor Elementary is the playground, and it's kind of that rubbery material. Over the years, because of the climate that we live in, we had expansion, contraction. Now we have a gap that is becoming a tripping hazard for the children. So we just want to get somebody out to fill that in so it's even, so we don't have that tripping hazard.
I think Chuck had asked before, but you guys probably didn't hear it. Can we put that surface underneath the Ithan playground, the new one, instead of seeding it? I mean, I know it'd be more money, but would it last longer and better? And getting worn down in the mud like the kids are gonna.
Well,
do?
the seating at Ithan isn't under
Well,
the
I mean,
playground equipment. It'd be in between the two playgrounds. We have mulch that we'll be putting down. I think it's 16 inches of mulch is required, 16 or 18 inches. That's what the compaction will be
So when you
when
said
the student
the
falls.
playground has to be seeded, or does it just have to cure the concrete bankers that it sits in? Is that why they can't get on it once it's installed?
No, they can physically get on the playground equipment, but in between the two playgrounds is area that's going to have to be excavated for the retention ponds that we'll have to reseed.
Okay.
So think of it as the size of a soccer field, maybe,
Yeah.
that we're going to have to reseed that they will not be able to get on.
Okay,
So if we can get the students down there without interfering with
No,
any
we
of that,
miss-
they may be able to get on the playground equipment.
Yeah,
We just can't
misunderstood
guarantee
when you
it.
said seeded. We thought you meant like the.
Oh, underneath
Seating the equipment,
underneath
like,
the
yeah.
swings and stuff.
Yeah.
No. It's like basically two kidney-shaped beds with a mound in the middle, and the mound needs to be have grass seed put on it, and then some side areas.
Is there a reason why we decided to go with the mulch rather than the rubberized surface?
I don't know the reason. That's what was originally decided. I'm guessing for cost factor with the mulch, but I can't answer that question without researching a little more.
We looked at it at Wayne when we put in the new playground.
Mhm.
I don't want to say it was almost quadruple the cost
Okay.
of mulch, so that was the reason we went with just the mulch.
Thank you,
thank you.
Tony. The high school is the building that has the majority of the projects. Oh, I'm sorry, middle school, that's the middle school. The middle school has quite a few number of projects, although they're not very costly in terms of some of the other projects. The wrestling mats currently used by the wrestling team are starting to deteriorate. They're actually folding up and starting to crack. They have been identified to be replaced for a number of years, as well as wrestling mats at the high school. There are additional windows for the fitness room that they would like to see those added, and then to the watershed room in 2021. This is something that they've been asking for in a long time. If you have been in the middle school, you know that they have a fitness room in what used to be a storage room. When the teachers are in the gymnasium area, they cannot see into that storage room. They actually have to walk out of the gym around the corner in order to be able to see inside the fitness room. So if there was a window, they would be able to see in. They would like some additional tack boards and things placed in that fitness room. And then they would like to have the stage and speaker pendants rebalanced, roughly $13,000. You can see there is carpets and flooring, $6,000, with year-to-date spent of $1,375. We do anticipate that the balance of that will be spent before the end of the fiscal year. That's why that cash is not available.
I'm not clear how you budgeted the windows. So are these two different projects that are both going to cost an equivalent amount?
They are. They're
Okay.
two different projects. They will cost roughly the same amount. Hopefully, our maintenance staff will be able to do that, but we will have to purchase the window. This is to cover the cost of the labor as well. At the high school level, we've moved a number of projects into from 1718 to 1920. Those projects are the PA system and the clock system for $90,000 and $30,000. Those have both been moved. You'll see the wrestling mats at $26,000. Again, those wrestling mats are in poor condition. This includes a lift. The middle school does not include a lift. The high school wrestling mats do. We have $25,000 for sealant. Again, that is classified as building integrity. You can see when Mr. Burnaby was here, he always would budget a little bit of money every year in order to do some small repairs and some sealing at the high school.
Again, I mean, this is like space age caulk. I mean, what kind of seal? I mean, I'm just curious. Like that's. I mean, I know it's a big building, but
Sealant, not like you're thinking. Think of.
I mean, I'm thinking like
brick.
caulk. Yeah.
No, your bricks are porous, so after time, if they're not sealed, the
Oh,
water
the-
can seep
yeah.
into there.
Okay.
If the water gets in,
Yeah.
and with the cold weather, it's going to freeze and break our bricks away. So this is sealant for the actual
Okay,
exterior
for
brick
the actual
wall.
concrete and the bricks.
We do a section at a time, is what Leo's been doing.
We had previously talked about the carpet for the library. This is a project that was originally identified to be completed in 1617 and finalized in 1718. We're recommending that $40,000 that was previously budgeted be reserved so that in 1819 we'll only have to transfer $40,000 in order to be able to complete the entire recarpeting of the library and only have to move all of the furnishings and things in that area once. We know that that's a big project, so we think it makes more sense instead of breaking it down into two parts over 2 fiscal years to do it over one. The bleachers, you'll see, yes, indeed, that has been increased over the course of time. It's now budgeted at $1 million. The last time we looked at it, it was at $600,000. We do know that the athletic groups are probably willing to help fund some of that. We need to enter into discussions with them to talk a little bit about what they may like to be able to, what they might likely be able to help us with. This project had initially been just the replacement of the bleachers. Todd and Mr. Bechtold, some of the maintenance men, had an opportunity to go to Ridley School District and look at a project that they did, which was much larger in scope. That project was roughly $1.2 million. So that is why we revised our estimate. And then
Do you want to discuss these now, or do you want to finish the report and then we'll
let's just
discuss?
go over all of them, and then we can have some more discussion. And then the last thing that's on the list for 1718 is the signage in the main gym. This is a project that's been pushed over multiple fiscal years. It started in 14-15, it got pushed to 15-16, got pushed to 16-17, it's ended up ultimately in 17-18 because the high school was not ready to do that. They are currently ready to do the gym signage, and they would like that to be completed in 17-18.
But it's just what it says here. That's just an aesthetic thing. They just want new stuff. I mean, after a while, if it's there long enough, it becomes a classic. You know.
A lot of it was taken down. A lot of the signage in the gym was removed when they did some renovations. So this is basically putting it back up and then putting up some new signage as well.
Why does it cost so much to put back stuff that we already have?
It's a combination of putting back stuff and getting some new things as well. So the last page here shows all the budget requests, the revised budget requests for 17-18 by the various building. It shows the cash on hand. It shows any projects that might have been moved into a future fiscal year like 18, 19, 19, 20, or 21 that we need to be able to reserve those dollars for. And then it shows the available cash on hand. So you can see we've got budget requests of just over $1,800,000. We've got cash on hand available just over $732,000. So if we wanted to complete every single project on this list at the cost that is identified, we would need to transfer roughly $1,117,000 to complete them. Again, we definitely do need to have some more discussion about which projects we would like to include or not include, and I'm certain that we will have revised costs too as we move through this budget process.
Okay, so do you guys want to comment? I definitely have some comments.
I did have a question. At what point do we want to move this to the board for their discussion? In other words, when do we have to go over this so are we expected to come up with a recommendation to the board?
I believe that the Finance Committee is looking for this committee to make some sort of a recommendation about which projects they would want to include. The preliminary budget, a proposed final budget, is going to be approved at the April board meeting. So we will want to do this in March or April. We'll need to make some recommendations so that it can be incorporated into that.
I guess my question would be, we have 1.8 million that we're looking at. Do you, as a committee, do we want to go through and then say, we would like to do this, we don't want to do that? And
Yeah.
some of the things, before we rule them out or rule them in, we're going to need a little more
Right.
information.
Right, so
Okay,
let's
all right.
do that now.
Okay.
Let's sort of get a feeling. So
Okay.
for me personally, I'm in agreement with everything that you put forward, with the exception of this $1 million for the bleachers. When we first talked about that, $300,000, and I was led to believe sports teams are really interested in this. They're going to come forward with a lot of that. I was like, well, that's a lot of money, but if the sports teams want to help contribute and they're really old, okay, $300,000. But I can't imagine spending $1 million on bleachers. What are they, gold plated? I mean, I can't. Just with the things facing this board right now, if it's a project we can't do for $300,000, then we may have to defer it. I just can't even.
Well, I think we have to wait for one thing to come back with the inspectors going to inspect it possibly even today to tell us whether it's an urgent need or whether we can push it back and not, jeopardize any of our people who would be using them. That would have something to do with it.
Do you understand? I don't. How it jumped from 300,000 to $1 million?
Well,
They told
the
the 300,000 was just to replace the basic, what we had, and then Todd and some of the maintenance guys and Mr. Friel and some other people looked at what they would like and what couple other districts did. And that's what they
so we
got.
had-
But the other thing is, I kind of question, if we approved spending $1 million on the bleachers and, new bleachers, bigger, better, there's no way they'd be done by the fall. Is there? I mean, the design, we're putting it in the budget for this year, but it's not like we wouldn't spend the money this year, so it'd be next year.
It would actually go over 2 fiscal years, and that's one of the
just-
options that you certainly do have.
That's what I mean, because, if we said today, we're going to push the recommendation, you go whole hog on, the sweetest smelling bleachers in Pennsylvania, and the board approves it next meeting, there's still no way we'd be spending all that money this year, because just the length of time it takes to get the approvals
Right.
to have them build them, install them,
Right, you wouldn't start if it was, today was the decision to move forward,
right, design.
you wouldn't start it until after the football season
Right.
to get started, and you would hope to have them done by spring, depending on the winter.
So one of the things that we could do as an option was, since it's going to run over 2 fiscal years, if we are going to replace the bleachers, we definitely will need to do some development, some design, permitting possibly through the township. And what we could do is take that $1 million and we could put 400,000, let's say, or 350,000 in the 17-18 fiscal year, and we could put the balance in the 18-19 fiscal year. We know that we're not actually going to do the installation of the bleachers until probably this time or later of next year. And then what we could do is we could readjust the number. We would have a firm number on how much that bleacher replacement was going to cost us, and we could transfer the balance.
Well, I'm completely unclear what we're getting for another 500,000 then, because we had already jumped up from 300,000 to 500,000 because of a few extra things we noticed. So now, what are we getting that you saw at Ridley that we didn't realize we needed? Because
So when Leo
what
was
is it?
here, when Mr. Burnaby was here, he had been revising the estimates for the bleachers over a number of fiscal years. It started, I believe, at 350,000. It got moved to like 400 or 420. Then it went to roughly over 500,000. So we were starting with the original number that was given to us by Mr. Burnaby. Then Todd and Dan Bechtold had an opportunity to go to Ridley and take a look at their project, and they were given information that the bleacher replacement that they did cost considerably more than they had anticipated. It cost them roughly $1.2 million. And the project was similar in scope to what Mr. Bechtold thought that we would be completing at the high school.
I think part of the concern we have here is the original numbers were under.
They weren't realistic.
They were not a realistic estimate from what I'm hearing.
I think it was just, I don't want to say a shot in the dark, but it was just an informed guess that turned out to be wildly low.
Right, because when I took over this position, my portion of it, I had no idea. So that's why I asked Dan and Mike Friel, who has done bleachers recently. Let's go see what their scope of the project was. Ask them how much they paid so we have a better idea. And that's where our numbers came up based on what we saw at Ridley. Ridley put a beautiful press box in. We don't need that because it's on the other side. So that's why we went less than what they paid. But
Was there
with
also a concern with them that, is it Ridley that you guys looked at that they're not particularly happy with part of it, and there was somebody else you looked at that is? Or?
Well, we went to Ridley, and some of the final touches they're not happy with,
Right.
which we would be able to foresee going into it. When we went over to Conestoga, that's just a brick structure that's beautiful, and brick is brick, and no matter how you look at it. So, we saw two different venues, and obviously we're going to go with quality, but not brick quality.
But didn't we also discuss the fact that we were looking at the possibility of some of the Enke Field bleachers maybe be able to roll into that, and a concession stand possibly? Is that included in the
That
million?
was brought up, but that's not necessarily included in this amount. We basically took what Ridley's structure was, which seats about the same amount we would be seating currently, and just kind of did that as a replication.
So if we're going to begin to negotiate with our booster clubs to help us offset some of this, I think we need to discuss with the entities that use those facilities, such as the concession stand. I don't know whether the band, parents, or who does that, may be interested in upgrading, so they in turn will be able to, turn a little bit more of a profit on that, and the lacrosse, the soccer clubs, and everything. So we need to pull some people together.
Agreed, and that's what Michelle is talking about. If we can put some money in, because we need to have people come out and do the measurements and give us estimates. We need to do that no matter what project we go with. So we need money to get that started, and then once they're out here, they can give us ideas. Okay, I don't want to say a menu, but if you want to do this, it's this much. If you want to add this, it's that much. And that way we'll have a better focus on exactly what it's going to cost. We're still shooting in the dark. We're just trying to be a little more realistic with what a local school district has spent in the previous years.
So for me personally, I am not in favor of doing this at this kind of scope. I'm suffering from sticker shock, especially when we're scrimping, on programming. I just can't imagine spending this kind of money on bleachers.
We're not at this point advocating on what to spend. What we're looking at is what can we possibly do with other groups that might be involved, if we can then put it over a 2-year period, and if we can then bring it to the full board. Because if we drop out the million for that, then basically our job's done.
Right, and keep in mind, in order to go to those other groups and find out what they're interested in, if they're going to pick some things up,
Right.
we need a better number, which we need people to come in, architects, et cetera, in order to start looking at this project.
So what would it cost to do that? I mean, I don't want to spend a lot of money on a project. I will not spend $1 million on bleachers. So
Well,
if we
that-
start looking at it and we start spending money on
Well,
something
if our
that
bleachers are-
okay.
we're not going to be able to
You-
afford.
Bleachers, it's a stadium at that.
Right, I think you're getting.
The issue is you're going to have to, you're going to have to replace the bleachers. Whether we're going to shrink the current seating size and only spend $600,000 or $500,000 or $800,000, or we're going to try to keep the same seating size, that I think is where you're going to come in and determine how much you're spending. We still, no matter what you do there, you still need the initial front end of contracting services to get the project started. And then it becomes, okay, what do we want to spend? How many seats are we doing? You know, we have to be ADA. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's based on the bleacher inspection. If the bleacher inspector comes back and say, we're shutting you down, that again is a different story as far as when our timeline, we can't push it back. But if he's going to come back or she's going to come back and say, you can buy yourself another year or two if you just paint it, that then I think gives us more flexibility. So I understand your concern of the sticker shock, but I think it's a matter of we need to do it at some point. The question is can we get started? Is this committee going to recommend we start the process of the initial front end, and then once that's done, we'll have firmer numbers and then decide how big of a scope is this going to really be?
Right, I'd rather start the evaluation and design process now rather than, if the guy says you got 2 years and then, 18 months from now, something falls off or there's a hole in it or something, and then, right back. We might as well take the time slowly to do it right. First time, plus what's the lifespan of these things? I mean, they're at least 30 years. Yeah, 30, 40 years. So, I mean, $1 million over 40 years, and then you go out and the value of $1 40 years from now, $1 million present day value of $1 million versus, in 40 years, it's cheaper.
So what would these initial exploration assessments that you want to do, what are we talking? How much is it going to cost to get this inspector in?
I do not have any idea. I mean, the inspector is already
Yeah,
coming. so
inspectors, in
that's
this year's
not an
budget,
issue.
I've already
Okay.
we've contracted services with them. It's a matter of, I don't know, and I just looked at Michelle and said, do you know? She doesn't know as far as what an architect, engineer of those type of things, what are going to cost. And I think that's why she was just shooting at a 350, 400 number, because obviously we're not going to spend it if it's there. We're only going to spend what we need, and then we would carry over, correct me if I'm wrong, to the
That's
following
correct.
year.
But certainly, having some money allotted for that will have a twofold purpose. In 17, 18, it will allow us to have discussions with an architect to help develop some type of specification, work with the current groups that are using the concession stand in the football field area to see what we want the scope of the project to be, explore any permitting issues that we would have with the township. And it spreads the cost over multiple fiscal years. So if we would transfer $400,000, and we recommend $400,000 to get the project started, if we only spent $100,000, we would have $300,000 freed up, and would also give us an additional time to get a better cost estimate. Until we have plans, we can't actually get
Right.
a firm cost estimate.
Yeah, I mean, it's like asking how much does it cost to build a house? What kind of house? Where?
Right,
What do you want?
Well, I'm in favor of moving it forward to that point so we can make
Yeah.
some type of a decision based on it. I also had heard that the possibility of restrooms at one point. So there's been a lot of talk over time about this.
Yeah, but none of that's in this, and this is already.
There has been
something.
tremendous talk
Oh,
about
no, I'm
locker
just saying, I'm
rooms,
just
concession stands, you got it.
Storage underneath.
Yeah.
Yes,
Crew
there's been a
facility
lot of
And,
talk.
and like I brought up when I was talking about this earlier in a side conversation, in order to, if you would want locker rooms, let's say, before you have to excavate all that land underneath those bleachers, it may pay you to put another structure up if you want to go that route. It may be more feasible if we want to do that. But again, those are the things we've got to decide if we want to do, and that's where we need a menu
Right.
list to
I
choose
have to
from.
believe it'd be cheaper to
Okay.
put a building on top of the flat area behind the pool than it would be to dig under.
So I think there are options that we need to begin to explore, which may be more cost-effective in the long run.
So do we want to put a cap on how much we want to spend to explore it, though? I mean, I don't think we want to
Well,
spend
I think we go with-
100,000
I
exploring
think-
this.
No, we wouldn't, but I think we go with Michelle's recommendation of budgeting in the 354 in this fiscal year.
And then she would come back to us with what would be necessary for their proposals.
Right, but what part of that do you want to put a cap on how much we spend exploring? Because if
Well,
we
there's
spend
usually
half
a-
of that exploring options, then
Right.
kind of
Well,
shot
there's-
ourselves in the foot.
There's usually soft costs that would be involved with that, which would include the engineering and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, you would get bids.
that's part
on
of the project.
Yeah.
I think there's so many questions at this point that we
Yeah,
need to get
I
a
think
few
it's a
answers.
matter of, if you're looking hypothetically at a 1,500 seat stand to a 2,000, you're going to have basically the same, for the most part, upfront costs in order to design that. It's not going to be that much more. So I don't think spending, let's say, $50,000 for 1,500, you're not going to spend $100,000 for a 2,000 seat structure. It's going to be a little bit more, but that's where we can come back then and say, okay, this is what we have. We know it's going to cost X. So if we want to go bigger, it's obviously going to cost more. And then if we decide to go that route, we can then have them do a little more research and say, okay, to increase it by 25% is going to cost X number of dollars more.
And Todd and I will be involved in this project, so we are not going to allow who's ever working on the project with us to spend half of that exploring options. Typically, what happens is you would request a proposal for architectural services. It would pretty much be a flat fee that you would pay, and that they would help you explore multiple options as part of that flat fee. So I try to treat every dollar like it's my own, and I know Todd does as well. So we would be monitoring the costs that were being spent.
Did the guys who designed I call it the new high school, but that's new to me.
Gilbert
Did they ever,
Architect?
yeah, Gilbert, there you go. Did they just, they had put designs on what happened, if they expand it, like, when we were talking about expanding it, they were like, well, we happen to have those plans, for expansions. They didn't happen to design like, this end.
Not to my knowledge.
That'd be too easy.
Good question. Good question.
That would make this way too easy.
Amazing.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
anything else on that
Maybe I
discussion?
can explore selling advertising to pay for this.
A lot of
Billboards
negotiating
all
to
around
do.
the
We got a
football
lot of
stadium.
So
negotiating.
do you have enough direction from us to move on that?
I believe we do.
Okay.
All right, seeing as how we're already 10 minutes over our time, is there any public comment that wants to be delivered quickly? Seeing none? No? Oh, well, come on.
Well,
Quick question, because I'm still not sure. If we go the direction of getting an architect engineer, and I agree with Lydia, this is an astronomical cost that's risen, incredibly fast. What do we look, I understood, and Michelle, you spoke about 400,000, but I think that's for how much to budget this year for the new stands. I don't think there was an answer to the question as to how much to request for an architect or an engineer.
So
40, 50,000?
So what we would do is we would use the 400,000. We know that those bleachers are approaching the end of their useful life. So we would transfer over 400,000, and then we would hire someone to help us explore options. Maybe that would cost 50,000, 60,000. I don't know
400.
how much it would cost. And then what we would do is we would take the 400,000 that we transferred, and we would deduct any cost that we had. We would have cash on hand. We'd have an additional year to help us come up with some better cost estimates, and then we would only transfer the balance that we needed. So the money would stay over in the capital fund earmarked specifically for bleachers unless there was a determination that the bleacher project was not going to be completed.
Okay. And even if, once again, you're talking multiple years for completion, it's still $1 million, no matter how you look at it. I think
but I
that
mean,
still
it's-
needs, that point still needs to be driven home to everyone, that's what we're
Right,
talking
it's $1 million,
about.
and, I know that, I'm not one for spending money ever, but it's $1 million over 40 years. I mean, those bleachers that have been there now were there, they were old when,
Over 50 years.
yeah,
And I
those
understand.
bleachers were there when we
That's-
moved
yeah,
here
that
30-something years
question.
ago. So, it's $1 million over 40 years, it's $25,000 a year.
And just one
the way
quick
to look
point,
at
because
it.
I know I'm waiting for the next meeting. The 50,000 on the HVAC that's going to be completed this year is still included on your last summary page.
It is. It has to still be included on there because we haven't actually spent the dollars. So it's just being shifted from one year to the next. So it does need to still be included on that page.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, everyone. I think we're adjourned.